Now, if you've watched about half the videos I've made on this channel, but especially my Pixar Problem series, and you can find a link in the description to them in case you're curious, I've spoken at length about how I feel that kids' movies have become too mature for children, and that they aren't really being made for them anymore. But instead of just rambling about that again, or pointing out even more movies that I believe have this problem, today I'd actually like to go over a movie that I feel is the exact opposite, which is to say, a movie where some might complain that it was too grown up for kids, but that I feel was actually perfectly targeted towards them. And that would be the 2009 stop motion movie Coraline. But before we go any further, I would just like to give my usual warning that there will be spoilers for this movie ahead. So if for whatever reason you don't want anything ruined about this movie, you should probably click off the video and come back later. You have been warned. Alright, so if you've seen my video where I talk about Pennywise's intelligence, and you can find a link to that video as well, I've made it no secret that I believe this movie is quite terrifying, even as an adult. And it's not too hard to see why either. After all, it involves portals to parallel universes, monsters that live in those universes, the absurdly effective simulation powers of those monsters. Oh, and eternal enslavement of the soul. I mean, come on. If the fate of the ghost children doesn't have you wetting yourself, then the other mother's first transformation will, because that's the moment you realize that this thing is no alternate version of her mother. And then, of course, there's her final form and Coraline's escape from her web, which honestly feels like something straight out of a horror movie. And now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, you mean to tell me that you don't think this isn't too much for kids? Well, it certainly is scary enough for them, yes, and is definitely too much for smaller children. But the important part here is it's not too mature for them. It's not tackling themes or exploring complex issues that children won't understand. Really, the deepest it goes is in the fate of the ghost children, and even that is something children can easily understand. Because at the movie's core, it's really about what being a parent and child really means. It's all about the family dynamic and how no imposter, no matter how great they may seem at first, can ever take away the love of a good parent. Which is something that Coraline learns rather harshly because of the other mother. To make my point a bit clearer, what I'm trying to say is that any kid could put themselves in Coraline's place. Because it's made with children in mind, they can easily relate to her and put themselves in the same situations as her, which probably makes it all the scarier for them as a result. As I said before, the importance of family and loving parents are at the core of this movie, and something that is not only really important to children first and foremost, but something they most definitely understand. But of course, there is also how frankly terrifying the movie is. Because I know some will argue, okay, so it isn't too mature for children, but isn't it too scary for them? And while it may very well be for some, on the whole I personally don't think so. Because as Jim Henson famously said when making The Dark Crystal, he believed that fear was something that children liked to feel, and that it was unhealthy for them to grow up without it. And I do see where he's coming from with that. If a child never experiences fear, how will they handle it as an adult? Even if they are just movies, age appropriate horror, like Coraline, can help teach children to process their fears and confront their problems rather than run away or shut down when faced with them. And let's face it, kids do have a reputation for loving scary stories, so in that respect, they would probably see Coraline as a dream come true. But for a more serious defense, quite a few child psychologists believe that movies like Coraline are very good for children because they believe it's important to show that evil forces really do exist out there, but also that these forces can be destroyed. And Coraline does a very good job at demonstrating this, depicting the other mother as a horrible monster who puts on the disguise of the perfect parent until she's about to get what she wants and is seemingly all powerful and unstoppable. But despite the seemingly impossible odds, in the end, Coraline, a 9-year-old kid, has the epitome of evil begging for her life and has rendered her powerless, condemning her to die a slow and painful death by starvation. In other words, this movie is very good at showing children that despite the fact that they may one day have to face evil in the real world, it isn't invincible and can be defeated. And honestly, I think that's a very good message to send. To put it another way, I feel that Coraline respects the intelligence of its audience. It's willing to be scary, show children some uncomfortable things about the world, and send their messages without spelling it out to them, knowing that they'll pick up on what they're trying to say anyway. But please do note here that there's a big difference between intelligence and maturity. Because children can be smarter than adults give them credit for, and Coraline recognizes that. But it also makes sure not to be too mature for them. Because, sure, it does deliver what it's trying to say intelligently, but it also says it in a way that children can still understand. As I said before, the movie is clearly made for children first and foremost, and that's very important. Because if children can't see themselves in the character of Coraline, then it's missed the whole point. Though, like most other movies, it does have things thrown in for the adults, but what's important here is that the kids come first. But do it in a way that both respects their intelligence as well as teaches them a few things about the world worth teaching. Okay, so to put it simply, I believe that even though Coraline is pretty flippin' scary, it is a movie that's still very suitable for children. And this mainly comes down to the fact that unlike Pixar, it isn't too mature for kids, doesn't talk down to them, and that the scary elements actually serve a purpose through the message it's trying to send. And I guess what's helped its reputation over the years is that it's not only a really good kids movie, but does also make for a pretty effective horror movie even for adults, which definitely helps it stand out. But let's not even get into that again. Alright, that's pretty much all I have to say on that. So now I'd like you to tell me, do you think Coraline is a great horror movie for kids, or do you believe it's too scary for them? Please feel free to tell me in the comments. And as always, you don't have to agree with anything I've said in this video. You can feel any way about this or any topic that you want to. And thank you all for watching. It's really greatly appreciated, and I hope to see you all next time.